Hello, everyone, and welcome to Keepin It Rural. What a Hoot series, as we were talking about what should we talk about this Christmas time and over the holidays? What types of obscure agricultural things are out there that probably not a lot of people know about? And we came up with Chestnut. And we have been around the block many a time looking for a person to join us. And man, we hit the complete jackpot. We have Marvin, who goes by Rusty, but that's what we're going to call him. We have Rusty here today, and Rusty is the farmer at Finger Lakes Nut Farm in New York, not New York City, New York, the state. And he somehow became a chestnut farmer. And he's told me the story, and now we're all going to be learning from him today about not only just how we got into this, but also about the cultivation of this crop and learning about the challenges and the successes and all those fun things. And I have a lot of questions about roasting chestnuts because I hear about this in the Christmas songs, but I know nothing about it. Let's get chomping here. I'm really excited, Rusty. Thank you so much for being with us today. Why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about you, where you grew up, where you went to school, what kind of your background, and then how you got to Finger Lakes Nut Farm.
Sure, absolutely. I grew up in north central Pennsylvania. I went to school, a small university, Lock Haven University, and I majored in geography. After I graduated college, I went active duty for about 5 years, spent some time overseas in South Korea and in Colorado, and ended up getting out of the service and ended up here in upstate New York, which is a really gorgeous part of the world. Very happy to be here. But hey, can I start out with a little bit of history of the chestnut tree in general?
Absolutely. This is your story. We are here to listen.
Yeah, so this is really why chestnuts are largely unknown here in the US. Is at one point in time, the American chestnut tree was a very majestic tree on the kind of the eastern seaboard, and they estimated it to comprise of 1 out of every 4 trees on the East Coast.
Really?
And they called it the redwood of the East because it was so large and so majestic. And its wood was very versatile. They used it was very rot resistant. They used it in a lot of construction and whatnot.
Isn't chestnut, like these days, things made out of chestnut are very rare and it's kind of spendy? Do they still use it at all or not really?
They're rare because it was consumed early in the 1900s and it hasn't been growing since.
All right,
So,
I just Googled a chestnut tree and wow, they are absolutely beautiful.
Yep. So what happened was a Japanese chestnut tree was imported into the New York Botanical Gardens in 1904, and it had this fungus on it, which was the blight that co-evolved with the chestnut trees in Asia. And of course, once it came to the US, or the American chestnut tree had no defenses. And in the 1920s and 30s, it estimated to kill 4 billion chestnut trees in the US. And it was largely considered the greatest ecological disaster in humankind. So that's why
wild.
Nobody in the US knows about chestnut trees because the American chestnut is largely wiped out and nobody knows about it.
So is nobody growing these either?
So the American chestnut tree is still, it's not functionally extinct. It's still out there, but because of the blight, it's a pure American chestnut tree can't grow.
Okay.
And we could probably, have a full podcast on the research that's being done on that and the advances that have been made to restore the American chestnut tree.
Huh.
What is going on though in Europe and in Asia, they have full-fledged chestnut industries, chestnut cultures. The chestnuts are part of people's everyday lives in Europe and in Asia. So everybody that's an ethnic European or ethnic Asian comes to the US, nobody has chestnuts. Nobody grows them. Nobody knows. Yep. So the US really imports in, I think it's 70 to 80% of the chestnut consumption in the US.
Huh. When at one point we were probably supplying it to other people or could have been.
So back in the day, they used to gather it up in the countrysides and send it to the major cities. And it used to be a large part of the economy for some of the smaller towns in Appalachia and whatnot.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
So in other countries, this is like an extremely common thing that, okay, I gotta go, I'm a chestnut farmer and that's not a rare thing. It's not super hard to find someone and way over in New York that grows them. Why do we only hear about it at Christmas time in the United States?
Because of that one song by Bing Crosby. That is
that's played all the time.
All the time. So thank goodness for that song.
Yeah, no kidding. Otherwise, no one would have a clue.
Yeah, no one would know.
I wouldn't even know that chestnut trees are a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. the reason that I came into it is I didn't realize I was going to be a chestnut farmer at any point in my life, but I was very fortunate to have a beautiful piece of property. It was the right type of soils. I enjoyed just planting and growing trees. I was growing different trees on my property just for diversity's sake. And I ended up planting some chestnut trees, and they did actually really well. And the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge was I hit my midlife crisis. I wanted to do something big and wanted to go big or go home. So ended up measuring out the property that my neighbor farmer had been farming, the normal corn and soybean rotation. I measured out the acreage. I did my research on how many chestnuts are produced per acre, what the retail and wholesale value of chestnuts are per pound, all the input costs, the cost per tree, for fence, for irrigation, for the trees. I crunched all the numbers and thought, if I'm going to do something big at some point in my life, now's going to be it. Give it a shot.
Rusty, you decided to do this, and I know that you do a lot with the Japanese chestnut. Like when I Google stalked you, like it says that, right? Because
Chinese
and you had to, because the Chinese chestnut, because you had to, right? Because the American chestnut's not a thing, really.
Yes.
That's why,
yes.
right? That's why you chose an Asian variety.
Yep. So two things. So the Chinese chestnuts, the Asians have been cultivating them for thousands of years. So these are like the Cortland or Empire apple of chestnuts. They are just nice. They're big. They're flavorful. And then, of course, they're blight resistant as well. The tree itself is not a pretty tree, not like the American chestnut. It's like an apple tree. It's not quite straight.
Wonky.
It's gnarly. But boy, it just produces these big mahogany, just beautiful chestnuts. They're weighty in your hand. There's so much you can do with them. So it's like really cool.
Huh. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, so let's start out when you first started this, because I know tree farming is not like a crop you do in an annual. It's a perennial type crop. It has a different type of growing season because they change throughout the years as you get more mature, right? So take us back to somebody we're starting, like way back when you started. What does it take to start? And then how many years does it take to get to a point where you're getting the crop you want to have? And then bring us all the way through that year. What does that look for you? What are you looking for pests? How are you managing those trees? And then the harvesting. So all the way through.
All right. How much time do we have?
I know. In the nutshell version, I'm using this pun the whole time.
Yeah, literally
nutshell version.
Okay. So the one thing that I've really learned is the establishment phase is really difficult. It is not easy. They are my tender little children out in the field.
Oh.
They are susceptible to drought. They are susceptible to your little voles gnawing at the girdling the barks.
Mm-hmm.
The deer love them to death. They don't realize it'll give them something to eat later on in life. They will gnaw on them. Definitely
a labor of love. Like this seems like a very intensive young start.
Yes, you have to enjoy the process. Don't do it for the money. So but really, there's nothing that I enjoy more is coming out of the field at the end of the day, dirt under your fingernails, the back of your neck is sunburned, and you just look outside and the trees are happy, so I'm happy, and it's a good thing. So anyway, definitely, the establishment phase is pretty tough. You have to keep them watered. The years that we don't get rain, they definitely slow down growing. For the people that don't have irrigation, they could die.
But you irrigate, right? All year round?
I do. So they require an acidic drained soil and well drained as in not dry. They like being watered, but as long as it drains away. So any like low spots, like you see some fields, there'll be a low spot and the water kind of stagnates. Yeah, they'll die immediately. So they like hillsides, they like that drained soil. Probably Minnesota is similar to the upstate New York, where it's a lot of the glacial till soils.
Yep.
So I'm very fortunate. It drains away for me, so I can water them as much as I like, and it just drains away.
Perfect.
So one of the initial investments I had to do was put up a deer fence around 15 acres.
And how high is it? Because they got to be really high.
8 feet high. Yep.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah.
Your neighbors probably think you're trying to avoid them.
And even though I have a fence around it, those deer seem to find their way in anyway.
Yeah, I believe it. They're resourceful.
They are.
Boom, they're in. Yeah, little buggers. So weed management, watering, all very critical in a young tree's stage. But for my particular farm, I'm on my 7th year now. They're starting to get that point where they're much higher. They're a little bit more established. The roots are bigger, so I don't have to water as much. And yeah, they're starting to take hold and really starting to put on some growth now. So that makes me very excited.
Yeah.
What is the average lifetime that a farmer would get out of one of these trees?
So
Typically.
chestnut trees in general are very long lived. There's stories of 500-year-old chestnut trees in Italy. Oh yeah.
So once you get it going, you're pretty good for a while.
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. It's not
Yeah,
like a cherry
cool.
tree where you have a certain lifespan of a tree. Yep.
Which also would make sense why they are so expensive and valuable when it comes to making things out of the wood.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay, so you are at the point where you have these trees and you have winter there, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you have winter, so then they grow their leaves back in the spring, like a tree, normal tree.
Yep.
Yeah. So then you get through the summer and you get them all the way to wherever you're harvest. Like, how do you know when to harvest? What do you look for? 'Cause I saw some pictures of chestnuts and they're weird looking. When
They
they're in
look
the
really
like fuzzy,
fuzzy.
they're in that green.
They don't look like
Tell
they
us
poke ya.
everything.
They are the sharpest, spikiest little burrs. So they're called burrs, and they're about the
Oh.
size of a softball. And it's
they're huge.
I didn't know they were that big.
oh yeah, they're good sized, but they're the perfect squirrel proof little container.
Oh yeah, because they don't want to. They can't get in there.
Oh yeah, they won't touch them. They won't touch them.
Perfect.
So the question I get all the time is, do you shake the trees? Because on the West Coast, your pecans and almonds, they have these tree shakers.
Mm-hmm.
You totally don't have to shake the tree. They will fall to the ground when they're ready. So the burr will open up and the nuts will fall free and they come right to the ground. Yep.
Probably just because it's so stinking heavy.
So how big's the nut in there? Like how big's the chest? There's just one in there, right? One
And
in
so,
the softball.
so there's typically 3 per burr.
Oh, I would have not guessed that.
No.
Yep.
Okay.
And they're roughly like an inch in diameter. Some are smaller, some are bigger. So they're pretty good size. Maybe not quite golf ball size, maybe a little bit smaller than a golf ball. But yeah, but they're pretty good size. So there's a couple different harvesting methods. You can pick them up by hand. There's these little things called a nut wizard. You walk around and pick them up. You roll around and pick them up. There's vacuum harvesters. And then there's friends and family until they get tired of helping you pick up chestnuts.
Is it a pretty labor-intensive process? I'm sure these trees, as they get bigger, they're dropping further and further away.
Yeah. So a lot of the different operations that are in business right now, what they do is they pay people by the bucket to come pick them up. So a 5-gallon bucket typically holds 30 pounds of chestnuts, and they give them, I think it's $18 a bucket to fill them up. And the one person I know, they say they have the Boy Scouts come and the Girl Scouts for fundraisers and the Amish.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And they just fill buckets up until there aren't any more to get picked up. So there's definitely a variety of ways. And then in Europe, there's automated like sweepers. They'll furrow them into a furrow, and then it vacuums them up, and it goes through like a separator and it sieves them out.
Wow.
And actually, the co-op that we started here in New York, we imported in a PTO-driven vacuum harvester from Turkey. So I actually have a vacuum harvester that I've been playing around with, and which is actually quite interesting because, it just sucks them right up off the ground. It runs them through like a separation process, and it puts them right into a bag.
You're so high tech.
That is so high tech.
Right.
So do the burrs also fall on the ground?
Yeah. So sometimes the burrs fall on the ground and sometimes they stay in the tree, but most of the time they fall on the ground as well.
Then what do you put them in? So you got all these chestnuts, and then what?
Yep. So we'll bring them back to the barn in the buckets, and then they go through a processing phase where you sanitize them, sort them, size them, and inspect them. You pull out any defects, any ones that look odd or split or whatever. And then you actually have to put them into a refrigerator, a high humidity refrigerator, because they're not a true nut like a hazelnut or a pecan or something like that.
Yeah. They're like fleshy, right? And they're like fleshy. Yeah.
They're like little potatoes almost. They're very starchy. So if you don't refrigerate them or keep them high humidity, they'll actually evaporate. The moisture will evaporate, and then they'll dehydrate and lose weight. And they'll actually start to mold on you once they start really losing a lot of moisture.
Do they have a shell or anything to protect them, or do they have just like a rough outage like a potato does?
Yep. So it's like a soft shell, and then there's like an inner skin called a pellicle, and then within that you actually have the chestnut itself that you eat. Yep. And it's not super hard like a shell, like of a pecan or something. You can actually bite it with your teeth and crack it open. So yeah, they're firm, but they have a little springiness to them, like a fresh chestnut.
Which is why you need to roast them on an open fire. You can't just eat them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Rusty, you mentioned this co-op, and so often with the interviews that we've been doing, many of these industries, whether it's cotton or beef cattle, dairy cattle, any of the crops have these co-ops that they belong to. You mentioned that you guys started a co-op out there because I'm guessing there's not a ton of you guys that do raise chestnuts. Tell us about that co-op. What are some of the things you're doing and how does it work?
Oh, absolutely. So we're called the New York Tree Crops Alliance, and we kind of modeled ourselves after a couple other different co-ops. So industry wide for chestnuts, there's a pretty large co-op in Ohio. There's one in Michigan. I think there's one in Missouri. And of course, the benefit of having a co-op is you can focus on growing chestnuts. You take your harvest to the co-op and they do the processing and the storage and the distribution and the selling and all of that.
Cool.
Anybody that doesn't belong to the co-op, of course, you're saddled with all that additional work yourself, but then you also get to sell everything retail yourself as well.
So then what is the market like? When we were talking earlier, you were talking about that Christmas, it's like everything's out after Christmas. All the chestnuts are
Christmas,
gone.
it's already too late.
How else is the co-op marketing chestnuts or just in general? And then how do they determine price? You already said they sorted. So you must have some kind of a size or grading that you're doing. So what does that all look like? And then where do these chestnuts go?
Yep. So basically, after we harvest, all the US based chestnut growers are basically sold out of their harvest in about a month and a half, 2 months each year. November or October, November, done. They're all gone, all sold. It's done for the year.
That is wild.
Yeah, but like I was saying earlier, the US imports in most of its chestnut usage anyway.
The percentage like of what would be domestically grown?
I think it's
or no idea.
70 to 80% of the
So it's a
US
lot. Yeah.
annual
Okay.
harvest. Yeah. And it's mostly goes to Asians and ethnic Europeans because
Oh,
people
sure, because they're
from
used to that.
overseas, they come here,
So
nobody
So
grows
a
them.
lot of the markets, so a lot of the ethnic markets are selling chestnuts.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, that's
And
super
it's
interesting.
and it's really neat because I've had some Koreans show up at the farm and Bosnians, and they are so happy. They're just like
I
just
bet.
bursting with joy. They're like, we're glad somebody's doing this here. And
Absolutely, because you're
Good
filling a
job,
need.
Rusty.
Yeah,
yeah,
you are
And-
meeting a demographic. That's awesome.
yeah, and that makes
Yeah.
me happy to see
Yeah.
people
Yes.
happy and just genuinely just happy that this has been reintroduced into their lives. Yeah.
Huh.
Very
Never
cool.
viewed a niche market that way as like, okay, there's a satisfaction
Uh-uh.
in meeting that demand for someone that wouldn't normally find that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of the ones that get most of everything imported probably is going to more of the ethnic markets, right?
Yes.
So some of yours would be as well. So I really need to know this. So for Christmas and this roasting chestnut thing, I know this happens. Like in New York City, right? Like they have this in the park or some little whatever place. I don't know where. I've never done there at Christmas time. But this happens. So how do those people get their chestnuts? Like, is there a market for that? These people that are doing these little chestnut
Right.
roasting things?
Where can I buy them?
They must be importing them. So every
Oh.
time I go to the grocery store, I look at the bins and I see where it comes from. And typically it comes from Italy. So all the ones that
Huh.
I see come from Italy. But the thing that's crazy is the grocery stores, they have them in these bins, like these exposed bins. And that's not how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to keep them in the refrigerator. They're totally.
Ooh, this is good to know. Hold the phone. I'm pretty sure I've never seen a chestnut at the
Hey,
grocery
it's
store.
for real.
Becca?
I've never
I
seen
think
it.
in Minnesota we don't have that. But okay, so you go to the grocery store and you actually see chestnuts there?
Oh,
Like they're there.
absolutely. Yeah,
Oh my
absolutely.
gosh.
I feel so left in the dark.
I do
like,
too.
back in the day when they're like, oh, the fashion in New York is this. Maybe in 6 months we'll have it.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I
Yeah.
feel right now.
Yeah, or I feel like sushi in Minnesota, not good. It's not fresh. So it's also we're sushi and chestnuts. We just don't have access. Okay. So that's neat and that's really cool to know. So there are people that just go buy them at the grocery store that are just like not ethnic communities. They're just like people that like chestnuts. And that's normal
yeah.
where you live.
And I feel bad for them too, because their first experience with chestnuts are ones that typically
That are
aren't
dried out.
good. Yeah, they're terrible. So I bought them and they're moldy and they're just not
Oh.
good. So it's,
Oh, I bet you're so sad.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You need to do like a public service announcement, Rusty, for
Yeah.
all the people. This is your
Absolutely.
moment.
Come
Give us your
fill
public
bucket
service.
at
Yeah.
Rusty's house.
that's
If
right.
you could tell the grocery stores anything, what would you say?
Oh, keep them in the refrigerator and I don't know, have some sort of like a placard on there and say, this is how you cook chestnuts, this is the things you can do, and this is how you
Yes.
store them.
Yes.
That's what your co-op can do. Dairy farmers do that.
You tell them.
Yes.
You tell your co-op.
That is absolutely on our list of to-dos. Once we get things established and get our equipment in place, outreach. It'll be outreach, outreach, outreach. Yep, absolutely.
And then, okay, how much are chestnuts? We don't know this. We can't buy them. I don't know where we would buy them if we wanted to. Maybe in the cities, maybe we'll be able to find them. So then how much do you pay for a chestnut?
So typically bulk pricing, $5 to $6 a pound, and like individual retail pricing, you're looking at $7 to $8 a pound, roughly. Of course, prices have been recently changing quite rapidly.
Of everything.
Of everything.
Yeah.
So,
And Rusty,
yeah.
maybe I missed this, but what are you doing with your chestnuts? Because if you've grown this to be something bigger than just something that you can enjoy, where are they going?
So I figured out a website, got it online, and right away people just started, like, once September hits, my website visits spike. And then I sell out. I had a guy show up with his truck, just wanted to buy 1,000 pounds of chestnuts, and then took them back, came back, and then cleaned me out my last year that I sold.
What do you
What did
do
he
with
do with
them?
them?
So,
Do you know?
so this gentleman had his network of ethnic Europeans that he grew up with.
Oh, so you got to make
and,
people happy.
Yep, and he just resold them all. He picked them all up just
love
for.
that.
That is so cool. Do you do direct selling? I mean, do you ship them to people or
Yes,
no?
yep, 5, 10,
Becca,
25
That's
pounds.
what we can do. We're ordering chestnuts. We gotta put it on our calendar for
Okay.
September.
Yes, and then
Like-
next Christmas we can do a follow-up episode and we can try making something with chestnuts.
I'm gonna
Oh,
roast it.
absolutely.
Well, okay, so Rusty, tell us what's happening with chestnuts, because you were telling me some stuff when we were just chilling in the beginning of this about soup and other things.
Yeah.
I do know I've heard of stuffing with chestnuts in it. I've heard of it. I think it was probably on a TV show or something. Like, I've not had it. But where else are people gonna find chestnuts, like, in their food?
Yeah, what do we do
Maybe.
with them?
So they're incredibly useful in many different things. So of course, there's your classic roasted chestnuts. And like I was saying earlier, I like putting them in soups. And you can blend them in a soup. You can like rough chop them in a soup, and it gives it a nice chestnutty
Nutty
flavor.
flavor.
Yeah,
Ooh.
it's very different. You can do it in any sort of blended soup. I have a couple different cookbooks with all different kinds of European dishes, Asian dishes, American chestnut dishes. You can dry them out and grind them into flour, and it's a gluten-free flour substitute, which you can find them in health food stores. You can actually take chestnuts and make beer or spirits out of them because they're carbohydrate based. The yeast will convert the sugars to alcohol. And when I went to Italy to research chestnuts, I had some amazing chestnut beer that I would love to replicate. That'd be
You'd be
bet.
famous. You'd get like a
Could you
chestnut
imagine like
brewery.
that nutty chestnut stout?
oh,
my
absolutely. Yeah, it's a thing.
Oh my gosh.
And it's really good too. Absolutely.
When you're
I
done
hope
with that,
this
you
is part of
email
your
us, 'cause
outreach
then we're
plan.
gonna come.
Yeah, so they're absolutely amazing. My little elevator pitch is it's so much better way to grow our food in general in an orchard style format. When you have an orchard, it's insect life and the bird life and healthy soils, carbon sequestration and all that stuff. It's just such a better way to do it. The only hard part is it just takes a while. It's that upfront cost.
Right.
That 7 to 8
Not an
years.
annual crop.
Yep.
For you
You
to
know.
see
Patience
in
is
a
a
very
virtue.
short period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the coolest things that my neighbor farmer said to me after I told him my plans of grandeur of what I was going to do with the property, he's that older gentleman. He looked at me and paused and said the wise words of wisdom. He goes, sometimes it takes somebody doing something a little bit different to prove that it can be done before other people will follow.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's my mission. I want to prove that it can be done, that this is a really economically viable way that we can produce our food, and it's better for the environment. I really believe that it is.
Yeah.
Right.
That is so
Wow.
exciting and just heartwarming to hear that. Okay, Rusty, tell us what else we can do with chestnuts. Now that we can cook with them, what else do we hear about them doing with them, whether it's byproducts or more food that we wouldn't normally think about?
There really isn't any, there's no byproducts for like the burrs or anything like that. The only things that you can really do, the fresh ones that are like the grade A ones that you sell fresh, they go quite quickly. That's 95% of it right there. The rejected ones, the ones that are split or they don't look nice or whatever, those are the ones that you typically dry out and then you crack them out of the shell and grind them up for the flour. And then,
Okay.
of course, because there's more processing costs, it's much more economically viable to sell them fresh.
Yeah.
So
So the
Okay.
actual chestnut itself doesn't have any byproducts, but it's more so you have the tree and the ecosystem habitats that it's creating as well. That's
Yep.
Which is a byproduct. There's a byproduct to
Totally.
that. It's just
Yeah.
a different
count that.
type.
yeah, and the leaves and the birds, they go back into the earth to,
Yeah.
provide nutrition for the next year. And that's about it.
And speaking of nutrition, you mentioned that they fall under the starch category. They're not technically a nut, but we call them a nut. Where does it fall in terms of nutrition? What nutrition does it provide to us?
So I've read this somewhere, and I don't know how true it was, but it said it's the same nutritional profile as brown rice.
Oh,
So
Wow.
very similar to that.
so very much starch. Yeah.
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 Yep.
Carbohydrate.
A starchy sort of thing. A friend of mine calls it bread from a tree instead of,
From a tree.
yep, because that's what you can do.
Like
Instead
a
of
gift
corn,
from God, more
you
bread,
just
but
get it
from a tree.
Oh, that is so cool. I didn't ask this before, but I do want to ask really quick. So when it comes to pest management, I know you talk about the blight that with the American chestnut. What other pest control do you have to look out for and manage throughout the year?
There's a couple different minor pests like Japanese beetles and potato leafhoppers. They like to gnaw on the leaves when the trees are young. The main pest that we definitely have to watch out for on the East Coast is a thing called the chestnut weevil. The weevil family has evolved for each weevil. There's like pecan weevil, a million different kinds of weevils, acorn weevils, and there's one that's a chestnut weevil. And there's a couple different biologic methods we use to control them. But that's the one thing you got to watch for, that you will have to use some insecticide, some pesticide at some point in time.
But that's
Yeah.
really it. So it's not really too crazy.
It's not too crazy. It's not too crazy.
As long as you can get them to survive those first 7 or 8 years, you're really,
Yep.
In
Yep.
better shape.
yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, herbicide as well. Weed management when the trees are small, but once they get to be bigger and control things a little bit better, you really don't need to spray any herbicides either, which is another positive thing.
That's so interesting. So interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Becca, is there any last questions before I ask our last question?
Bing Crosby, I just don't understand this man. Why is he roasting chestnuts in the winter if you can't actually get them in the winter? And is there
He
actually
ordered
any
ahead,
connection?
Becca. He ordered ahead.
Yeah, he probably kept them refrigerated too. Yeah. But Rusty, is there anything that like actually associates chestnuts with Christmas besides Bing?
I don't know. I actually Googled that because I thought you were going to ask me that question. He wrote the song in
And
like
she did.
1940, which was like after the American chestnut was gone. So I don't know. I think it was
that's
just
wild.
like the residue of that culture of a bygone era. Because that's what the people.
Maybe when he was a child, they did that in their family.
Yep.
So we can call it a tribute to a bygone era of the American chestnut tree.
Yes. But here we are again. We could do it now. Oh my gosh, this was so intriguing. I am so excited that we found you.
Yes.
Thank you, Google, for being a great place. Rusty, our last question that we want to ask you is, how do you keep it rural?
It's funny because, my happy place in the morning, I'll make my cup of coffee and I will walk outside, put my boots on. I will walk out in my orchard and I'll just watch the sunrise. I'll drink my coffee. I will look over my trees and it's just my happy place. It's just the world is quiet and it's waking up and I'm happy. So
Rusty, his coffee and his Chinese chestnut orchard.
That's right.
You can make a commercial about that.
Yeah.
This would be good for your
I mean, this has been just really cool. And Rusty, you're a cool guy. Thank you for being awesome.
Yes.
And I do think that it will be on our calendar to order some chestnuts next year. And we are going to try to roast them on an open fire.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
I don't know how well it'll go.
Yeah.
Make sure you order early. Don't wait.
Maybe we'll put it for July and we'll email you.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And in my package, I want you to send me one of those burr guys. I just got to see it.
Yep.
Okay.
See the burr.
I can do that.
I will not try to let it poke me. Okay. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope everyone's really enjoyed learning about chestnut farming, something that not a lot of people know about for sure. And I think really for me, what Rusty really portrays to me is the chance to start a farm. And you got to think out of the box sometimes. A lot of young people are like, I can't be a farmer. I didn't inherit one. You know what? Sometimes you can make something out of a smaller amount of land and make it really successful by thinking out of the box and taking a chance. So Rusty, to me, like, you are just a great story of an entrepreneur that took a chance on something really neat, and look at you doing it now. Just so everybody knows, Rusty also works a full-time job during the week. He is a busy guy with that and his farming operation. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad you got a hold of me.
Absolutely.
All right, you have a very Merry Christmas.
You too.
It's not a party without you there. Follow our crazy on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to check out all episodes and extras at keepinitruralgirls.com.
Until next time, keep it rural.
It's time to pour on the fire and call in the dogs. That's all, folks.